and welcome to 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking three powerful questions. I'm your host, Rachel Vogel, and joining me tonight is Lyndsey Havens, the senior editor at Billboard. Lyndsey has written cover stories on global stars, including Billie Eilish and Post Malone. She's reported live from the Grammys red carpet, and she regularly covers music management and vinyl. She formerly co-hosted the weekly Sirius XM show Billboard Live, and is a frequent moderator for organizations including She's the Music, the Grammy Museum, and more. So, Lyndsey, are you ready to dive into these three questions?
I sure am.
Here we go. Imagine for a second you're sitting down with your 25-year-old self. What one piece of advice would you give her on a personal note, and what one piece of advice would you give her from a business perspective?
On a personal note, I really think that I'm just now starting to understand what it means to actually implement boundaries. People talk about boundary setting all the time, and for years I thought that I was doing that by saying no once a month or once a year even. Thought that was enough. But I've really in this past year taken time to weekly carve out boundary setting exercises. And I constantly am reminding myself, and I would love to go back and tell my 25-year-old self that if I want to make a plan with myself, that's just as valid as making plans with anybody else. So trying to do that more and remind myself that that's okay, that I don't need to fill every second of my time. Business perspective, I also think that something I'm learning more and more the longer I've been at Billboard. I've been there almost 7 years now. And the people in the business and the industry that I think I keep in touch with the most and who are the most helpful to me are the people who from day one prioritized me, the person, not so much my relationship to Billboard. My title has changed a lot during my time there. And of course it's a job. People are always going to need something from you. And I always need something from someone else too. But I have noticed the people who from the start wanted to get to know me, and when they don't need something will still reach out just to check in. Those have sort of been the most beneficial relationships in the end.
And unfortunately, those are like the rarest.
Totally. And not to go long, but I moved to LA about 2 years ago from New York, and New York was perfect to start my career. Every single person, 99% of the people I would hang out with were in the music industry, if not directly worked at Billboard. And living here, I have a lot of high school friends who don't even know when a Taylor Swift concert is, going up for pre-sale. And that's incredibly refreshing. So that I guess that sort of goes back into like boundary setting, choosing my time more wisely, who I want to spend my time with, and yeah, being around people who don't only care about what I do.
What was that like for you shifting your position from New York to LA? I feel like a lot of people have done that, but we don't really hear like the transition while you're working and what the difference is like.
Yeah, I was really lucky that job wise, not much changed. It was pretty seamless. I will say I feel like I've had some more opportunities here just to be more, I guess, front facing in terms of interviews. A lot of the artists live here, a lot of managers live here. So that's been helpful. And then personally, I'm in my boring era. I'm an errand girl. So to be able to like get in a car and drive to Target and then load up my trunk is something I could never do in New York. And as simple as that sounds, that is, I guess, yeah, everything I'm going to say is coming back to like how I want to spend my time and setting boundaries for myself. And if I want to spend an hour walking around Target, that does wonders for me.
Oh, totally. I moved here from New York as well. And when I walked into my apartment and actually had a kitchen, that was the best day of my life.
It is wild.
All right, moving on to question two. Every industry has its dirty little secrets, and you and I both know that that is absolutely no different in the music industry. Sometimes people think that's a bad thing, but that's not always the case. Sometimes they can be good. What's one secret you would like to share with our listeners about the industry?
So I feel like when I was thinking of this, the only answer I could come up with is sort of a cop out, but I do feel like it's an open secret that everyone I admire in this industry has and prioritizes a hobby, which was honestly the very first advice I got from my mentor in journalism. He was the critic at the Chicago Tribune for 20 plus years. And on day one, he was like, if you want to do this long term and be successful and sane, find a hobby now. And I never quite did that. But every meeting I have to this day, people tell me the same thing. You want to be successful and sane, make sure you have a hobby to put your energy into. And so I do feel like it's an open secret where people talk about it. But I sort of look around me and I'm like, I've been hustling for so long. When did everyone have the time to not only find a
Literally.
hobby, but develop it? And then you devote time to it. So I
Hmm.
think that's where, like, both personally and professionally, where I'm at now is I'm trying to figure out what that other thing can be. As my career stabilizes, fortunately, I think I have the time for it now, but I don't know. I guess this is another a personal secret is like it's okay to also really love what you do and to want to spend a lot of time doing it. So I feel like as long as I'm fulfilled by the work, and like I said, as long as I'm setting some boundaries, that it's okay if listening to music and going to concerts and writing about music is also my hobby, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like a lot of people in this industry and even just like in the entertainment industry in general put a lot of emphasis on like you should not spend your personal time doing your what you love to do at work, but sometimes it just like is what you love to do in general, like all around. So
Totally. I feel lucky that I get to do what I love, but I also, look at the people who are like pickleball pros right now and I
I
see
just
that it's
started
benefiting
pickleball.
them.
Yeah.
That's what
I
I'm
did just
saying.
I did just hop on that train.
Yeah, and I bet you're loving it and I bet it's providing some mental clarity, all the things I hear that it does for people.
Yeah, we'll get you out there. We'll get you on the
One of
courts.
these days, yeah.
Before we jump into the last question, I'm curious to know, is journalism and like music journalism something that you always wanted to do? Like, did you go to school for that? I feel like that's always such a huge part of the industry that a lot of people don't really talk about.
Yeah, it's interesting because I talk about this a lot, I guess, with coworkers is like I consider myself in the music business, but I'm more in the publishing business, which I think is quite nice to be music business adjacent. We're covering its every move, but I knew very early on that I wanted to write and I knew that I loved music. And I the idea of meshing the two together, I think it must have been my grandma or my dad gave me a Rolling Stone magazine, tale as old as time. But the fact that I knew really early helped me kind of like chase after it. So
Mhm.
I was seeking internships in high school. I was able to go into college as a freshman, declaring a major in journalism and knew I wanted to work at the newspaper. Like it's just been sort of a long time coming, leading to the job I have now, which I'm really grateful for. But yeah, I love some of this goes into the last question.
Okay,
I love,
okay.
but I love what I do. And it's nice to know that what I wanted to do sort of lines up with that.
Okay, well, now I have to ask you the last question.
Sorry.
Throughout your career this far, I can only imagine that you've been asked plenty of questions, whether for industry conferences, the media, or even a promotion. But throughout all those interviews and all those questions, there has to be one that you've never been asked but would have liked to. So, what is that question and what would be your answer?
Yes. Sorry, the journalist in me just like leapt out with preparation. But I think it's interesting that, and I understand, everyone always asks either how you got into the job or people really want to know what's this artist like or what was this concert like. And it's all fun to talk about. But I honestly don't think anyone's ever asked me why I do what I do. And if I had to guess, so much of that is because it's the perks are very front facing. I'm out and about, joined Instagram 2 years ago. You could see me at a concert. You could see a cover story that I did, which I'm so proud to share. So it might seem obvious, like it's a quote unquote cool job for the most part. But I think at the root of that goes into some of what we just talked about. Like I wanted to write, I wanted to tell stories. For me, the writing is a huge part of it because at some point editing came along and there are other interviews I do that are just filmed and then I go home and I have no transcribing or writing to do whatsoever. And that's fun. But as grueling as it is, the actual process of sitting down, I do all my writing at night. And sometimes, it feels like a college final. I'm up until 3 or 4 a.m. But when you turn in a cover story that you're so proud of, no, or not even a cover story, but a story where you feel like you hopefully really saw a person in the way that they wanted to be seen, and you built that trust with them and you get to help them tell their story, not so much just tell it for them. Like that to me is literally, there's no comparable feeling to that.
Yeah, that's incredible. Do you remember? I'm sure you do. The very first real interview that you got put in with an artist, like maybe you got flown out somewhere. How did you like maintain your composure?
I do remember. Fortunately, because I was obsessed with internships for so long, I had some experience before like the big opportunity came along. But my very first cover story for Billboard was with Billie Eilish, who I loved and I still love. So that's great. And I was, as if it couldn't have gotten better, I was already being flown out to Coachella. My first time at Coachella, I think maybe like my second time in California, that was all taken care of. And then on top of that, a few weeks before, I got called into an office with the features editor at the time and was given this assignment. First ever cover story on Billie, her first Billboard cover story. Obviously, the timing could not have been better. Her debut album just came out. It was her first Coachella performance, like everything aligned. And it sort of became like the first, and I still think the ultimate like story on the business of Billie Eilish. So we met at her hotel room before the festival, and I definitely was nervous. I showed up to the hotel probably an hour early just so I could like
I still do that
prepare.
for meetings and stuff. Like,
I needed time to like sip a bubbly water and just collect myself. But then I think this goes back to my last answer is like something else clicks in me when it's time to sit down and speak to this person. It's important to still see them as the superstar that they are, because that's, context for your line of questioning and how you frame a story, but to just be able to talk to them like the way I would truly anyone else.
mm-hmm.
And I think it goes with like any other conversation I have. I hopefully that, I'm illustrating respect and trust that goes both ways. And it's the same thing with them. Like even the more difficult interviews where someone might be on edge, I still want them to know that I'm listening to them. I'm not coming in with any agenda. I feel like doing that helps me stay a little bit calm during the actual interview process.
Right. Yeah, that's so important. I feel like it all goes full circle to what you said in like your first answer. You're doing what you love, so that's obviously going to come across for them as well.
Yeah, hopefully.
Well, thank you, Lyndsey, so much for joining me tonight on 3Q. It was a blast.
Thank you.
And to everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Stay tuned for next week of 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking 3 powerful questions.
So honored. Love this podcast. Thank you again.